This video is sponsored by Capture One.
In the new version of Capture One, we now have AI masking, which is huge for portrait photographers because now we can make complex selections a breeze using these features. In this video, I'm gonna break down how you can use AI masking to take your editing workflow to the next level in a fast, efficient way. And if you've been on the fence about getting Capture One, now's the time to take advantage, guys, because they have a Black Friday sale where you get 50% off. And if you want more information, I'll have that linked in the description. Now, let me give you an in-depth look on how to get the most out of Capture One AI masking. Let's go ahead and cover todo el pedo. The first thing I want to focus on is the differences between the subject and background AI selection. Now, I don't want you to restrict your mind. Well, Capture One can only do subject and background selections. We're going to look a little bit more in depth in a moment, so just be patient with me. So let's first look at this subject here, and let's see how it does on this particular photo. So I'm going to go ahead and hit subject. And what's great is it will automatically make a new layer for us. And you'll see that there's a new interface now with the new update. So once I do that, the key thing is, remember guys, we have shortcuts here. So you want to push M on the keyboard. That's going to show you what your mask looks like. And it's going to show us if we need to make any further adjustments. So what you'll notice that it did miss some spots over here. So if I want to remove that, it's relatively simple. We do have a AI erase button. And then if I want to add, I can also go into the AI select. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get the AI erase. And what you'll do is when I hover over it, it will give me the complementary color of my mask. So you'll see in blue is what it's going to fix. So I'm going to remove that, and I can simply just click and remove those areas. Now, when you want it to get into smaller areas, like here in between the shoe, it's recommended that you go ahead and zoom in to the image. And what you're going to see is Capture One's going to say here, preparing AI mask. And what this is going to do is that it's going to give you a higher resolution. And if you want to get more details, definitely zoom in. So I'm going to go in here and then click and click. Now, another thing to keep in mind, when you're using this AI technology in Capture One, there is no internet connection needed. It is not sending it to the cloud. All of this AI technology is being done inside of the software. So right now I'm just going around and I'm just fixing in little minor areas that Capture One didn't do. Now right here we have the heel. So I'm going to go ahead and go back into the AI select. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add to that selection. So when I hover over it, you'll see that it's in red because that's what I want to add on. So I'm going to go ahead and click it and we have that back, and we click there, we have that back. And let me see, is this an area? I don't think this is an area that we want. And I'm going to go ahead and remove the rest of the areas that we don't need. Now, one thing to keep in mind is, let's say that you don't want to use the AI erase. You can definitely still, because it's a mask, you can still go in and use the regular eraser tool. So you can still modify this mask even after you do the AI subject selection. So I'm going to go ahead and push M on the keyboard. Now, if I want to make further refinements to it, if I go ahead and put here refine mask, I can then check mark display mask, and I can make further adjustments and feather it if I choose to do so. So in this case, I'm not going to do that. Now, once I have this subject selection already in place, you'll notice that right here, it got the little bar a little bit. So same thing, I'm going to go back to my AI erase. Now, here's a little tip, and you want to write down this shortcut if you guys are Capture One users, is if I hold Alt on the keyboard, you'll see that it turns into a minus symbol. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that. So it's just a little bit of a faster way of working in Capture One. You definitely don't want to be going back and forth to these buttons. So I'm going to go ahead and double check my selection. And let me just do a couple more refinements here. After you've made your selection, there are other ways to see your mask a little bit better. So if we push M, like I showed you earlier, it'll just show me the red mask. But if I come up here and I right click or just click the option here, you'll see that I can also display it in a grayscale mask. And I can also, if I'm on a Mac, I can press Option M. So let me go ahead and do that. So if I press Option M, now I can see what it looks like in a grayscale selection. All right. So now that I have this selection, what's the whole point of this? Well, the point of this is to take advantage and to make my exposure adjustments. Let's say I wanted this to be a little bit brighter, so I can move it up. I can go ahead and add contrast if I wanted to, and I can increase the black slider and the shadows here. So if I push M on the keyboard, you'll see that all of those adjustments are strictly going to the mask area. And if I push Y on the keyboard, this is the before, and then the after, so before and after. Now let's take a look at another image. So if I go into this image over here, what I can do is I'm going to go ahead and do the subject selection. And then on this image, I'm also going to do a background selection. So each time I click these buttons, Capture One's automatically going to add a separate layer for me. So on this image, if we take a look, push M on the keyboard, you'll see that we have a little part that it missed. So I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to get my AI erase, and it's going to prepare the AI mask. And remember, zooming in helps out, helps us get a little better of a selection. And if it doesn't work out that well, I can always just use the regular eraser tool, because we can always modify the mask after Capture One has made its selection. So I'm going to zoom in between the fingers and just clean this up really quick. Now that I have my selection, once again, this is where now I can add exposure. So let's say I wanted my subject to be just a little bit brighter. And the same thing, I can go in there and add contrast and add clarity. Now in a second, I am going to show you that you can do this with batch editing. So do the subject selection and the background selection, make your adjustments so you can apply this to multiple images to speed up your workflow. So just stay tuned in a moment. So once again, I'm just making adjustments to the subject. So if I push Y on the keyboard, this is the before and then the after. And now if I go into my background mask, let's take a look at this. I push M. It's made a pretty good selection. I'm going to go ahead and leave it like that. And what I want to do now is, now with my background selection in place, this is where I can go ahead and brighten it or darken it if I wanted to. So typically when people shoot, they want to darken up the background just to add that separation. And this one, I might go in and add a little bit of saturation to the background. Maybe add a little bit of an S curve on the Luma range here. And so if I have that, this is the before and then the after. So the overall, I can see before and then after. And once again, I can come back to my subject select and then make that a little bit brighter if I wanted to. So before and then the after.
Before we move on, I do want to remind you about the Black Friday sale going on this week, where you get 50% off all in store for both new and existing customers. And if you guys use my code, you will get the Beyond Film Style Pack for free. Now, if you're a little bit intimidated by Capture One, maybe making the transition, on this channel, I have plenty of editing tutorials so that you guys can get the best out of Capture One. Let's continue. Now I want to focus on the AI Select and AI Erase tools. Now, the key thing to remember, guys, is don't restrict your mind to thinking that there's only a select subject and background in Capture One, because if I look at this image here, I've already done select subject and I've made the mask. Now, one of the issues if I make a mask with this is that automatically it selects the entire body, but what I want to target as a photographer, a portrait photographer here, is that the legs are very bright, right? The legs were closer to the strobe, so that's why they're brighter. And if I do it with the subject mask, and I go in here and I reduce the exposure, it does it to everything. Like, I wanted the face to look great. Like, now I've messed up the exposure on the face. If I go in there and do highlights, it does the same thing. So what I want to do is, instead of doing the subject mask, I'm going to go ahead and erase this. I'm going to hit the minus here. Is what I want to do is I want to use the AI Select tool. So I'm going to go here. And now, instead of thinking that I have to select the entire subject all the time, with this tool, I can specifically target the legs now and make a selection of that. It makes a new adjustment layer for me. Now, if I push M on the keyboard, bam, we have the legs selected. Now I can get the exposure, bring that down, bring down the highlights, and not affect the exposure on the face. So if I push Y on the keyboard, before and after. Now, another little tip here is that same thing. I don't want to always have to think of, I have to select the background here, because I want to darken up the foreground here. The background is already the correct exposure that I want, but here I find it that it's a little bit too bright. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the AI Select tool.
I'm going to make a selection of the bottom portion. Now, the key thing to remember here is I'm going to show you the incorrect way of doing it. If I still have this layer here, which is my legs, if I click this, what's going to happen is that it's going to add it to the legs with the settings that I have. I want it to be separated. So I'm going to press Control Z. What I want to do is I want to add a new layer. So I'm going to go up to this little section here, add new empty layer. And now when I click here, I've now separated it from the actual leg adjustment. So now that I have that selected, I can adjust the exposure of that area and I can reduce the highlights. So overall before and then after. Now let's look at a couple more examples. If I look at this image over here, same situation. I don't want to do a subject selection of the entire body because if I look at this image here, I notice that the dress in the face is a little bit too bright. So I'm going to get the AI select brush. I'm going to go ahead and make a selection of the dress here. Now, if you're wondering, well, Eli, it didn't get all of the area in between her hair here. I'm not worried about that part because that area is not super bright. I'm really focused on this section here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down, scroll down to the high dynamic range, bring down those highlights ever so slightly, and bring down the exposure. So before and then after. Now, if I felt like I went too far, I can always make those adjustments and readjust it. Now, I also want to apply this to the face. If I push M, right now it's only selecting the dress. I'm going to now zoom in, right? So I can get a new mask. Remember, when you zoom in, it helps Capture One get better selections. And then now I'm going to go ahead and click. And now I've also added the face, and the face now has that highlight reduction and exposure adjustment to it. Let's look at one more image here. So I did a birthday shoot, and I used a gobo where I had the numbers 2 and 6. And let's just say, for example, I wanted to make the 2 and the 6 a little bit brighter. Well, we use that selection tool. You see I get the 2. I'm going to go ahead and select the 6, and I'm going to go ahead and click these and make sure that I have a selection of that. And once I have that, now I can go in here and increase my exposure if I wanted to. I can make my if I can come down here, there you go. And I can go into my Luma range and make that brighter if I wanted to. So just showing you different ways of how you could take advantage of this AI select feature. Now I want to show you how you can use styles and presets along with the style brushes mixed in with this new AI technology to help our workflow speed up, but also how we can batch process our images. So on this first image here, this is a great example. I do a lot of high-speed sync where I get these dramatic clouds in the background, but let's say that I just want to automatically apply preset settings to deepen a moodier sky. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my style brushes first. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to deep sky. And what I want to do is right click on it and use on a new layer. Now, nothing is going to happen because now what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell Capture One, I want you to mask all these preset settings. Now, let me go ahead and hover this down. You'll see how there's preset settings. It brings the highlights, whites, and clarity up. And it does all these little presets, right? Now, if you want to make your own presets, you can. And if you don't know how to do that, I have other videos on my YouTube channel. Look in the description. So with the deep sky already selected here, I'm going to go into my AI brush or AI select brush, and I'm going to identify and say, this is the area that I want you to apply those settings, and also this sun back here. And now when I push Y on the keyboard, look how I get a quick dramatic sky already. Now I'm going to also show you another one. I'm going to zoom in here, and let's say we wanted to whiten the teeth. So I'm going to go ahead and go into my little presets here. I'm going to go back to style brushes, and I'm going to go into whiten teeth, use on new layer, still have my AI select tool selected. And now I'm going to get the teeth here. So I'm just going to select them individually. And now the teeth have already had that adjustment. So if I go back to my selection tool, this is the before and then the after. And then the same thing. If I go into the iris enhance, use on new layer, if I zoom in, now I can make a selection of the eyes here, and I can automatically apply that. So I click there, it automatically adds that. And if I go in here, now remember the key thing is when you want to get details here, you definitely want to zoom in into Capture One so it can make the selection a little bit easier for it. So if I click there we go. So now if I go to Iris Enhance, before, after right there, and let me just do Y on the keyboard, there you go. And if I go back to the opposite one, Y on the keyboard. Now, I feel like it went too far here. That's okay, guys. We can use the AI erase if I needed to. Or if I wanted to, in this case, I feel like, you know what? I'll just do it myself with the eraser tool. I'll just go in there. I'll make that erase myself. And there we go. Now, another thing is, let's say that it's too much. Remember, guys, we have the ability in Capture One, because as this layering system, I can use the opacity to make any adjustments to these. I can go into the whiten teeth, same thing, adjust that, and even the deep sky as well. And now what I want to do is, if I go into my styles and presets, I've already made a custom style. But if you guys want me to show you how to make one from scratch, let's do that right now really quick. So let's pretend, and I'm going to do this relatively quick so you guys get the general idea. Whenever I edit my high-speed sync shots, usually what I do is I typically do the same thing, right? I like to get my subject to pop a little bit. So maybe I bring up the exposure, add a little bit of contrast, and once again, M on the keyboard, I have a selection here. I'm not going to erase this because you guys already know how to do that. This is just for example's sake. I'm going to bring up the blacks and the shadows, and this is just to make the subject pop a little bit. And then the background, right? I made a selection of that. And let's say that I want that to be a little bit darker, and I want the highlights to come down on the background, and I want the saturation to go up and bring up the clarity. And of course, you know, I can make all these other adjustments. I can go into the oranges and make them a little bit more saturated and do the hue and etc. So I hope you guys are getting the point here, right? So the point is that I can make any adjustments to those two areas. But let's say that I have to do this over and over and over and do this to all of my images. I want to set up this preset so I can batch process multiple images all at once. So now that I've made my two layers, now in your case, once again, you would style them and add the settings that you would want. This is just an example here. But now, let's say that I wanted to make this into a style and preset. So if I hit these little dots here, I'm going to put save as custom style. And the key thing here is that I want to make sure I have check marked the background mask and the subject mask that I've already created. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit save. Now, of course, if you have any other things that you want to save in there, you can definitely do that. But in this case, I'm just going to do those two. I'm going to hit save. And then here you can name it. I'm just going to name it HSS2. I already have one saved already. I'm going to hit save. And now it's going to be into my custom style right here, HSS2. So what's the whole big advantage of doing this? Let's say that I want to do this to multiple images. I'm going to reset this one really quick. And I'm going to go ahead and select multiple images. I'm going to get this image here. I'm also going to get this one. I'm holding Command on the keyboard, by the way. So I'm holding Command. And now I have 4 images already selected. So let's say that on all 4 of these images, I've already want to apply this adjustment. So I'm going to go in here. 4 of them are selected. I'm going to go into HSS Style Pop. And now when I click that, it's automatically going to apply it to all 4 images. So here it says applying styles to 1 of 4. This is where I can get a nice little coffee break, take a chill pill, right? Just relax and let Capture One do all of the work for me. So if you're a portrait photographer, OMG, this is going to save us so much time. And so now once this is done, of course, it's going to be dependent, how long it takes is going to be dependent on your computer software. Now what I can do is I can look at all of these images, and you can see here the before and then the after. Bam, bam. That is beautiful. And if I take a look at this one here, before, after, and this one here, before and then after, man, this is going to speed up our workflow. Another feature I want to show you is how you can also use Luma Range along with your AI mask that we've created. So in this image, I've already done my subject selection, as you can see here. And one of the issues that you might run into is, okay, I make my selection. Let's say I want to brighten up the image, right? And so I go to Luma Range, or Luma, I should say, and I increase it. It brightens up the entire image. But let's say I just want to target the highlights or the midtones and brighten up that and not everything. Even if I come to exposure, you'll see we run into the same problem. It brings up everything, right? And I only want to brighten up specific areas. So what I can do is I can go into Luma Range,
And now when I go into display mask, I can tell it and restrict the shadows and the blacks from being adjusted. So I'm going to adjust this mask and right about here, and I'm going to feather this off just a little bit. And now when I have that, what you'll see is when I increase my Luma, it is only going to do it to that small section now, and it's not going to do it to everything else. So it's just a little helpful tip. Those of you that maybe want to get that in camera, like global, or not in camera, but I mean is in Capture One, get that global dodge and burn already in place. We can do that here using the AI subject along with the Luma Range. If you all want to learn more about Capture One, I have more editing tutorials on this channel to help you maximize the full features of Capture One. Thank you guys for watching. You guys have a beautiful day, and I will see you on the next one.